This podcast episode was made possible in part with support from Sacred Rights, a project funded by the Henry Luce Foundation and the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation and hosted by Northeastern University. Sacred Rights is a project that supports public scholarship on religion and provides resources and networks for scholars of religion committed to translating the significance of their research to a broader audience. I recommend you learn more about Sacred Rights on their website at sacred-rights.org or find Sacred Rights on Twitter at sacred_rights. Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. This is a podcast where, since 2017, I have discussed all things religion with a variety of fantastic scholars, historians, journalists, and educators. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Sana Patel. Dr. Sana Patel has distinguished herself as a scholar specializing in digital Islam. She is the recipient of the 2023 Digital Religion Research Award presented by the Network for New Media, Religion, and Digital Culture Studies. Dr. Patel's research explores how Islamophobia manifests in online spaces and how digital technology shapes global anti-Muslim experiences. Her research interests include studying digital religion, religious diversity, religious authority, religion and immigration, Islamophobia, and non-religion. The main topic of conversation on this episode is Dr. Patel's recent publication, Hybrid Imams, Young Muslims and Religious Authority on Social Media. You can follow Dr. Sana Patel on Twitter at SanaPat21. That's SANAPAT 21. Thank you so much for listening. Dr. Sana Patel, welcome to Classical Ideas.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm wondering if we can just kick this off by having you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners out there so they know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sana Patel. I'm a scholar of religion who has studied the experiences of young Muslims and their religious behaviors, both in online and offline spaces. I'm especially interested in how they interact with online spaces when it comes to religious purposes. I'm also an advocate for anti-Islamophobia measures, and I study the impacts of Islamophobia on Muslim Canadians as well. So basically, I guess I'm an expert on digital Islam.
Well, I'd love to know a little bit about kind of how you found your way into that area of expertise. Can you kind of trace your academic stepping stones and journey along the way and kind of tell me what are some major turning points that led you to where you are now in this career?
Sure. So I actually did my master's at Carleton University in Ottawa. And my master's thesis was on Muslim identity in Toronto. And while I was doing my research, I was asking my participants, how do you practice Islam? What does being a Muslim mean to you? What does being a Canadian Muslim mean to you? A lot of them talked about how they went on social media when they needed any clarifications or if they had Islamic questions. So that got me intrigued by, well, what is actually happening on the internet when it comes to Islam? Why are so many young Muslims? I was looking at the millennial generation at the time, and I continue to do so for my PhD project. Why are these Muslim millennials going online instead of just going to the mosque to ask an imam a question? Why is it that these online imams have millions of followers? And I was just really intrigued by really what is happening on digital Islam, I guess. So I designed my PhD project around that. At first, what I wanted to do was kind of interview these popular Muslim religious figures online. But my supervisor and my committee members were just like, nope, you cannot do that because your project is way too big. You're going to have to kind of narrow it down. So an imam is someone who is traditionally trained in Islamic matters, in Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence, and they have the education and the expertise to lead others, not only in prayer, but guide them Islamically. So if anyone has a question, what does Islam say about this? Can I do that as a Muslim? They are trained to come up with these legal rulings and kind of answer those questions and guide Muslims. I started looking at imams with an E because they're cyber imams, and
Mm,
yeah, so I was really
interesting.
interested. Yeah, so it's cyber imams, and actually my PhD thesis title is imam, so EMAMS. And yeah, so basically that's how I was, interested in studying what's happening online, and then I designed my PhD project around that. And what I did for my PhD was look at imams, but I wanted to know how young Muslims were interacting with them on social media. Why social media? How did they give, or how did these people have authority? What does this mean for the imam who's sitting at our local mosque? And I did this project at Reviving the Islamic Spirit Conference. So
Hmm.
this is like a conference that happens in Toronto every year. It's been happening for the past 20 years, and it happens around Christmas time. Well, Muslims don't celebrate Christmas. Most
Mm,
Muslims don't. So what are they going to do around Christmas time? Well, a lot of them go to this conference. Actually, over 20,000 go every year to this conference. They come from around the world, around Canada, around the States, because it's just easier to kind of just drive down to Toronto or drive up to Toronto.
yeah.
And at these conferences, just imagine like a mega church, where there's like a huge stage with lots of lighting and maybe like a background visual, and there is someone with religious authority just giving a speech that's like really motivating. So that's how Reviving the Islamic Spirit Conference is. A part of the conference is like a marketplace, a bazaar where you can shop for stuff, Islamic clothing, hijabs and abayas, Muslim nonprofit organizations. So there's this one area for socialization. There's like a food court with our halal food, and then this big stage where everyone or these imams are actually there and giving these speeches. So the reason I chose this site for my project was a lot of the young Muslims that I interviewed in my master's said they go to this conference and they meet these people that they follow on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. So that's how I kind of got to my PhD project.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love how you used something that you learned about during your master's and then it launched into like the next phase. That's really cool how one sort of led into the other, you know? You know, I was looking at your bio as well, and I don't mean to put you on the spot and embarrass you, but I noticed that you won an award recently called the Digital Religion Research Award presented by the Network for New Media. And I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit more about what that was, because that seems really cool.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I actually did the award lecture for it earlier this year. So this award is given to a scholar who contributes to the field of digital religion. So I wrote a book chapter for cyber Muslims,
Hmm.
called Cyber Muslims, and my book chapter was on hybrid imams. So basically, I talk about what research I did for my PhD, these imams that I looked at, and what that meant for religious authority in both online and offline spaces that contributes to the field of digital religion from my Muslim, Canadian, and American perspective. So yeah, I was really excited and happy to win that award. It's really an honor.
Amazing. Well, let's talk more about that exact book and chapter. You just mentioned that you contributed to a book called Cyber Muslims Mapping Islamic Digital Media in the Internet Age, which is an essay collection edited by Robert Rosenall. And I'm wondering how you got involved in that collection in the first place.
I first met Rob at the AAR, which is the American Association of Religion. American, I believe so, AAR. I've been calling it for the past year. So it's a conference where, scholars of religion get together and they talk about their research, what's new in the field, what's been going on, any developments. And they've got many different committees. There's, the Contemporary Islam unit. They've got sociology of Islam, I believe. They've got just m many different communities. So I go every year as a PhD. I think it was my first year in 2017. I've been going every year, just meeting other students and scholars of religion, people who kind of study media in Islam like I do. So I was really interested in that, and I've been going to these panels that are about Islam and, digital Islam, whatever that means. It could be Islam on the internet, Islam in movies and TV shows. So I've been going to these panels, and I remember I went to one panel, and once the panel was done, there were just a group of people discussing the representations of Muslims in media. And I just kind of, butted my way in, and I was talking as well. And I had a book in my hand, which
Mm,
was actually Rob's book, Cyber Sufis. And
mhm.
it's a really great book if someone wants to kind of dive into the world of what Sufis are doing online and how they have religious practices, beliefs on online, how they portray it online. So it's pretty cool. It's a cool book. So I was talking to these scholars, and one of them was Rob, and I didn't even know it was Rob. I didn't even know I had his book in my hand. We just got talking, and then I left, and I still didn't know that was Rob until the year after. I met him at another conference or like a workshop we were having. I was involved in this project called the Canadian Muslims Online. So in that project, we were trying to figure out what are Canadian Muslims doing online? How are they using the internet? What about social media? How many Muslims actually use the internet for religious purposes? So I was involved in a project for about 4 or 5 years, and in that workshop, we were presenting our findings. And then Rob came, and then he was introduced as a guest speaker. And I remember when they introduced him, like, "Oh, this is Rob Rosenall." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I've met you before." So that was kind of funny. And then we spoke after the workshop, and he told me about this book. And I let him know, well, this is what I'm doing my PhD on. I can totally contribute to that if given the opportunity. I would love to know what others are contributing as well. And it just kind of came about that. And I think it took like a couple months for me to write the chapter, have it edited, and then we finally came out with the book.
Okay, so let's chat about the exact chapter that you wrote. So, Hybrid Imams, Young Muslims, and Religious Authority on Social Media is the title of your piece. Just give listeners a little bit of an overview of what you're reporting on in this particular essay that you write in the book.
Sure. So in this book, I discuss imams and their impacts on young Muslims and what I found in my PhD project. Because at that time, I had done most of my research, I had done most of my interviews. I interviewed 50 people that I recruited from Reviving the Islamic Spirit. This occurred between, I think it was 2018 to 2019 to 2021, I believe. And it was between like when COVID happened. So while I was doing my interviews, some of them were in person, some of them were online, some of them were on the phone because we
Hmm.
could meet. And at that time, we had the restrictions where you couldn't leave your home, not even to the mosque. So I really wanted to kind of write about like, well, what is happening online if people cannot go to the mosque to pray or to speak to an imam or find their religious community, well, the internet must be booming. So when I was doing my interviews, I kind of asked about that as well. And in this chapter, I talk about how religious authority in Islam, especially in the people that are interviewed from their perspective, religious authority has shifted. So mostly it has shifted from an offline space into an online space. It's not new. I mean, ever since the beginning of the internet, when everyone started using it, there were websites, there were message boards and forums where people can discuss religious matters. Even Muslims, there were websites where you can find out, hey, is this allowed in Islam? Or your typical, what do Muslims look like? This is what Muslims believe in. So Muslims were always on the internet, but because of social media, it's really provided a platform for many people to find a religious community, find what they believe in religiously, and these imams who actually found this platform where they can engage with a younger audience. So
Mm.
they weren't really restricted to an offline space. So like a mosque in Mississauga or Toronto, they're not just restricted to the people who attend the mosque in Toronto or Mississauga. But if they're online, they can literally talk to Muslims and people who are not Muslim online from anywhere around the world, right? Anyone
Mm.
who has access to the internet, who can follow them on their social media pages. So I discussed that and how that shift has occurred, how we see that shift, and it's because of people who are following these imams, giving them, I guess, a huge list of followers and following, reposting their tweets, just quoting them or interacting with them. It is actually giving them authority. Yes, you know what you're talking about. Give us some more. Hey, what does
Mm.
this really mean? So they have a chance to interact with these religious authority figures that they might not have if religious authority was strictly offline. And in my interviews, what I found, and I do write about this as well, that one of the contributing factors for this is how the internet allows anonymity. So if someone has a religious question, hey, in my marriage, am I allowed to do this? Someone might not want to go and ask an imam in person, face to face, just maybe they don't want to expose themselves or whatever it is. It's a personal question. Well, on the internet, no one has to know who you are. You just need to have a username, then you can go and ask this question and then they'll answer it for you. So that's one of the contributing factors. And also the ease of accessing these imams, that someone doesn't have to go drive down or walk down to the mosque, go look for the imam, go look for when the imam is available. Hey, I just want to know this. You can directly ask the imam on social media or on YouTube where they might have already answered these questions. They'll just type in, I want to know, can I pray with nail polish? Just type that in Google or like a website with Islamic rulings. So it's very accessible. People have these imams on their phones from
Yeah.
social media, right? On Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. So I write about that. I also kind of narrowed down on some specific imams like Omar Suleiman, who's out in the public when it comes to religious matters, when it comes to politics. He's always out there. So a lot of the people that I interviewed would say, "Oh, I'm a fan of Omar Suleiman. He's a great imam. He knows what he's talking about. I like his style, his charisma. So that's why I follow him. I can relate to him. I also talk about Mufti Menk, who's an imam from Zimbabwe, I believe, but he's got millions of followers on Twitter. Even celebrities like Nicki Minaj follow him. And all his tweets are like about love and empathy and forgiveness. And so they're not very religious as this is what it says in the Quran. This is what we should do as Muslims. If you look at his tweets, um, love is the way to go. As a Muslim, you should really just love everybody and forgive everybody. And that tweet's gonna have 1 million likes, follows, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess he kind of tries to interact with others or relate, or he makes his content very relatable that you don't even have to be Muslim to be like, oh yeah, this person's right. This guy knows what he's talking about. It's all about peace. So I discussed that. I talk a little about reviving the Islamic Spirit Conference, how it's a huge conference, just giving like a background of it and why people choose to go. Well, it's Christmas time and they actually get to see someone who they've been watching on YouTube for the past 3 years. Like that's a big deal to them. So that's what I discuss about in this chapter. And I'm just going to say that social media, the internet is just going to keep evolving. So
Hmm.
we're going to keep having to study what is happening in the digital Islam era.
Yeah. Well, and something else I'm wondering about is the generational divide. Okay.
Mhm.
So, what are you noticing about how various generations of Muslims in the US and Canada are using the internet for religious purposes? What kind of differentiation is there? And, like, kind of where do those breakdowns happen as far as age gaps go and things like that?
hmm That's interesting. So I think what I would like to do in the future is actually do a study with the different generations and then see how they actually use the internet for religious purposes. But in my study, when I did interview the 50 people, so they were all from the millennial generation. So at the time of the interviews, they were between 18 to 35. And that's how I define the millennial generation at the time. And one of
Hmm.
the questions I asked every single person was, do you see a generational gap between you and your parents and how you practice Islam? So a lot of them did say, well, if I want to know something about Islam, I'm going to go and do my own research. I'm going to go online. I'm going to go on all these different websites, and then whatever I read, I am going to come to a conclusion, and I will decide how I feel about it, or what is the right thing, or how something should be perceived. Whereas my parents, well, they're going to go to their traditional sources. They might just open up the Quran, they might read it, they might read a translation of the Quran if they have a question. They might go to the local mosque. They don't trust online sources. But I know how to vet these sources. I know what is authentic and I know what is not. I'm going to look at, well, if this website is telling me it says in the Quran that, let's say, women must wear a hijab, then I'm going to see if there are any sources to that. Where are they getting this information from? This guy just writing a blog on Muslim women and hijab. Well, where is he from? What perspective is he writing from? And what is someone else saying about Muslim women in the hijab? And then I will come to a conclusion, whereas my parents won't do that. So this brings me to the lived religion theory. So that's what I write about that as well. And this is the theoretical framework that I look at through in my study while I'm doing my interviews, while I'm writing about the results, my data, what I'm seeing. I'm looking at it through a lived religion perspective, which really just comes down to, for me, for my participants, how young Muslims, choose to practice Islam. So are they going to an Islamic authority to figure out their beliefs, their practices, and their rituals? Or are they taking it upon themselves to translate the Quran, to look at Hadith, to kind of come to a conclusion on what to believe, how to do rituals? And that is lived religion, where you do not really need religious authority to tell you what to do and how to do it. You're taking it upon yourself to kind of come to a conclusion on your beliefs and your practices. So all the people that I spoke to, all 50 people, they had their own way of doing lived religion. Some of them will say, yes, I'm going on all these websites, I'm doing my own research. Others will be like, yes, I'm going to do my own research, but then I'm also going to confirm it with my parents. And then I might also confirm it with someone at the mosque, and then I'll decide what I want to do. But at the end of the day, they're deciding. They're not being told, well, this is what you must do. You must pray like this, and this is the only right way. So it really shows the diversity of how Muslims in general, practice Islamic things, what they believe Islamically, and it just comes down to like how diverse they are. There's not one type of Muslim.
Mm. I'm wondering if the online behaviors are impacting offline behaviors of people you include in your research. Like, how is the online impacting the in-person behavior of the people that you're talking to?
Yeah, so in my interviews, I had a lot of examples of that, and it was things like, well, I need to know if I can fast if I have an exam. I have an exam. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fast in Ramadan for like 13, 14 hours. So I am going to go and ask somebody online, ask a religious authority figure online what I should do in my offline life, and then they'll do their research and they'll come with a conclusion, and then they'll decide to do that offline. Or in their offline spaces, when it comes to like going to work, going to the office, or going to school, how they might have to like interact with others, or what can they do if they cannot pray, if they're at work all day, if they're at school all day. They're gonna go look for that Islamic information online and then decide what to do from that. So, again, religious authority online, and really it's kind of bringing together their online and offline lives, because they might have an Islamic community online where they know where to go for Islamic information. They might have friends online, other Muslim friends online that they might not have in their offline lives. And then they kind of have like a hybrid life, like a third space where they're practicing things that they both learn in online and offline.
Is there anything else that you feel like that you're really excited about in your research right now that you feel like is pertinent to share with listeners out there that we didn't get to?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm sure everyone has heard of artificial intelligence and chat GPT and how easy
Hmm.
it is to just get it to kind of help you or write for you. Well, I'm really interested these days to know about what is AI doing for Muslims. I mean, there's been some talk about AI filtering through Islamic legal rulings. So you can just ask AI, hey, I'm a Muslim and I don't know what to do. So Islamically, when it comes to this matter, what should I really do? And then the AI will go through these Islamic rulings that are fed to it and be like, this is what you should do, or this is what scholars agree on. This is what Muslims choose to do, So I really want to get into that and then find out how everyday Muslims are using AI when it comes to Islam. So I'm trying to design a project around that, and I'm really excited about that. And yes, so that's really exciting.
Wonderful. Well, tell me a little bit about how you are feeling about the Sacred Rights program and the trainings for public scholarship that you've been going through with your cohort.
Sure. So this is a very important program, and I am so happy that I'm able to be a part of this cohort. Actually, ever since Sacred Rights got started, I've been wanting to be a part of it because I always felt like I need public scholarship training. I want to talk to everyone about the research that I'm doing or the research that I'm reading about, but I do not have the skills to do so. So I've been trying to get into it every year, and this year I actually did. I just finished my PhD last year, so this year when I applied for it, it's like I finished my PhD. I have these opportunities to kind of talk to everyone, and I would love to be a part of this program. And I'm so happy that I got accepted in it. And my cohort is amazing. Everyone's working on different things, really important things as well. Like, I really appreciate how this program offers us the skills and teaches us the skills to talk to, let's say, the general public.
Hmm.
I appreciate that because in academia, we're not really trained to do so. I mean, okay, I have my master's, I have my PhD. I am trained to write journal articles. I'm trained to write academic books, academic chapters, and I can do so, no problem. But when it comes to talking to people about my research, I always hesitated because I wasn't sure if they understood the concepts or the terminologies that I was using. I had to just simplify it, and I didn't want the important stuff to be kind of filtered out. So Sacred Rice is offering me this opportunity to learn these skills, to talk to people about the academic research that I'm doing, and I'm enjoying it so far.
What are some of your biggest goals that you're hoping to accomplish as far as public scholarship goes?
Yeah, so I really want to discuss the work that I'm doing on digital Islam. So talk about the celebritizations of imams and again, coming back to religious authority, how religious authority is changing and how we can all begin to kind of understand it by talking about it. And this is important because when we talk about the shifts and changes in religious authority, when we talk about look at how many Muslims are online, look at what they're doing online. We're really talking about how different Muslims are because, or how, I guess, how different they are from how they are portrayed in media, in movies, in TV shows, and in most cases, and research has showed this as well, it's a negative portrayal. So Muslim men are the bad guys, they're the terrorists, they're really violent. Muslim women are always oppressed, they're forced to wear the hijab. Well, that's not really the case because Muslims are different. So when I talk about, hey, look at how cool and hip Muslims are, look at all these imams, I think it's important for people to know, look, Muslims are different. Muslims get to make their own choices. They're not just how they're shown in movies and how violent they are. I mean, that might be the cases for a minority of Muslims, but that is not the case for Muslim majority of Muslims. And also, there are Muslims in China, there are Muslims in Malaysia, in Canada, in the Middle East, we're not just all from the Middle East. So when I talk about traditional Islamic scholars, online Islamic imams, the social media platforms, what is happening online, I really want to um, combat and kind of show a positive portrayal of Muslims because this negative portrayal of Muslims, it does impact Muslims in their everyday lives, and Muslims are being killed for it. The
Mm,
Afghan Muslim attack in London, Ontario, where a Muslim family was killed just for being Muslims, or the Quebec mosque massacre, where people were just praying and then they were just killed because they were in a mosque praying. So these things have real life consequences, and not it's not just Islamophobia on the street, Islamophobia in the work. People are losing their lives. It is violent. So I really think public scholarship for me is a way to kind of combat that, kind of show that, to humanize Muslims, basically.
yeah. Well, okay. So, in I know in sacred rights training programs, there's a lot of talk about risks and rewards. What are your thoughts on that as far as like getting out there and being visible and some of the risks that you take, but also some of the rewards that you might reap from doing so?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And as scholars, we do have risks and we do have rewards. So for me, excuse me, the rewards would be, well, let me show the diversity of Muslims. Let me contribute to a positive Muslim representation. Let me tell people about the diversity of Muslims and how we are also humans and how we shouldn't be dehumanized. And I think that as an academic, as a scholar of religion, and also an insider to the Muslim community, I have this responsibility to do so. And for some of the risks, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think for me, one of them is miscommunication. So where I might be misunderstood, I might be misunderstood because I don't have the skills to talk to the general public, to talk to people about my academic work. So I'm always afraid about, no, I didn't mean this, oh no, someone took it the wrong way. So that's one of the risks I've been thinking about. And hopefully I won't come to that risk because and then if something does happen, there are more rewards to it. I have a responsibility as well. So that's something that I need to focus on.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Sana Patel, I am delighted to learn about your work in the online space, the virtual world, and the ways that it interacts and overlaps with religion is something that I've tried to do an okay job covering on this podcast over the years. I've talked about like online churches and things like that, and I was talking a lot more about it during the pandemic. So I'm really glad to revisit this topic with
Hmm.
you a couple of years later to see how things are still progressing
Hmm.
in the online spaces. So this conversation really does mean a lot to me. I'm wondering if you have any places that you would like to direct people's attention if they would like to follow along with what you are personally working on.
Sure. If anyone's interested in the work that I'm doing, the lectures that I'm giving, or any other public scholarship of mine, they can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is Sana, Pat21. So it's just a short form for my last name Patel. So it's Sana Pat21. Yeah, they can follow me there. I'm actually giving a talk on digital Islamophobia and how to combat digital Islamophobia through storytelling and Muslim women's fashion next Monday at 11:30 a.m. Through the Canadian Council for Muslim Women. I did tweet about it, so if anyone's interested, the link for RSVPing is there.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Sana Patel, I am delighted to hang out with you and learn a little bit about your work. Thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot.
Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate it.